StudyIQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।
Hello friends, the UPSC civil services interviews, those people who are appearing for civil services interviews, many times the questions are often asked which somehow carry certain degree of controversies or do not have precise answers. In that context, what happens is the students often feel that what should be the right approach, because on one hand they are planning to get into the system, they cannot largely look pessimistic, and on the other hand the very nature of the question is highly controversial, which may from a practical perspective or a practical or empirical view require certain answers where you would have to take a critical stand as well against the system, against the government, against the governance. In those circumstances, what should be your approach to give the answers? This session, where I'll be discussing 5 to 6 aspects of questions which have been there in the news in the recent time, at the same time carries a high degree of probability in order to be, which can become a question in your respective interviews for civil services. Not only civil services, but any interviews conducted by the government bodies, such as, again UPSC in the context of, assistant commandants whose physical test is in the progress, and there would be certainly an interview for that as well. This session would help you in order to develop a perspective which helps you to tackle those difficult waters more smoothly. So let's start with this. But before getting into those controversial questions which have been there in the news, there are certain aspects which I would like to tell you, or on the basis of my experience of civil services interviews, which I learned over a period of time through trial and error. There are certain rules which you should definitely follow as far as the civil services interviews is concerned, or any interview with respect to the government employment is concerned. First, you should always follow the spirit of law. Majority of the times the aspirants largely follow the letters of law. They try to implement the scheme as per the laws or procedures. They try to give the schemes as per the government, as per the laws which is present. But we need to accept this. When the judiciary itself has started accepting this, there are certain problems present in the laws. We need to adhere strictly to the spirit of law, because at the end it's a civil services interview where you would have to interact with the people. And when you interact with the people, that empathy has to be there in your heart, as well as the sympathy should be there to an extent in your mind. If you rigidly stick to the procedures of law, there is a possibility you defeat the very purpose of a scheme. So always remember in your interview, when you enter into the interview hall, or when you are just about to enter into the interview board's room, in that context, always keep in mind the last thing you should keep in mind before entering to the interview room is that I'll follow the spirit of law, because it is the spirit of law which makes the policy more implementable. It is the spirit of law which ensures good governance. And since you are going to be the part of government mechanism, your ultimate goal is to progress the system, ensure the progress of society, and ensure the good governance and its implementations. The second thumb rule which I personally believe you should follow in your interview is the clarity of thought. I believe this is the most important aspect, not only during your interviews, but as well as in your examinations which you have already cracked. The clarity of thought largely creates the best impression as far as the interview is concerned. When the board members are clear that this particular fellow, this particular aspirant or candidate is having absolute clarity of what he is saying. He is aware about the words which he have used in the answers, and he is also aware about the practicality which is need to be taken into account when you largely implement or when you go to the ground level situations or field level working. So always have a clarity of thought. Never try to give a diplomatic answers. I do accept it that there are certain answers in which there has to be certain degree of diplomacy. But diplomacies should be the part when you get into the system. But before entering into the system, your clarity of thought would take you into the system, and your diplomacy will help you to maintain in the system. Please ensure this, that clarity of thought is absolutely visible to the examiner, to the interviewer, so that he is actually impressed by your personality. Because personality, we often say, is very important, but personality does not mean wearing a nice clothes, having a nice mustache, or looking good during the interview. That is a part and parcel of the game, but at the same time, this is the most important aspect which would actually create an impression on the examiner, or here in this context, the interviewers. After this, concrete expression of opinions, which should be appropriately worded. Many times we do have an answer, many times we do have a facts, we do also have justifications for our opinions, but they sometimes it is not clearly worded. And when the things are not clearly worded, it is not the impression actually comes down. And interview, those 25 to 30 minutes on an average, going to be the best or the most important minutes of your life as far as your civil services journey is concerned. If even an average answer, if it is appropriately worded, it largely creates a very good opinion. And beside these 4 points, one point I would really like to recommend all those aspirants who are appearing in interview by choosing their language as an English. Always keep in mind that your interview would be completely in English. Suppose if you want to quote a particular saying or a quote or a one-liner, do take the permission from the board, or from the chairman of the board, or from the respective member who have asked you a respective question, that ma'am or sir, can I represent, or can I elaborate this by giving an example of a particular one-liner which is in Hindi. Because if you largely use English in your English interviews, that is going to create a very bad impression as far as the examination or the interviewer is concerned. So if at all you would have to use a Hindi quote or a respective, don't try to use a local language quote, because there is a possibility, that is vernacular language quote, there is a possibility those people or the board members may not have a clear idea about that. So if you are trying to use a particular vernacular language quote or maybe a Hindi language, please take a kind permission from the examiner, from the interviewer, and only then quote it, or else your entire interview, your each and every word has to be in English if you have selected your medium to be in English. So without wasting any more time, let's go into certain current aspects which have been taking place in the society or hovering around us from long period of time, appearing often in newspapers, news, social media, or the handles of the respective government departments. Let's look into those questions and let's see how to actually present a viewpoint. My pedagogy in this entire session would be, I'll give you a particular question, then I'll give you certain background of those aspects or issues, so that you get a clear crystal idea how exactly this particular topic has been maneuvering around our current affairs. And then I'll give you 2 answers for one question. You can choose either of it when you give it largely, if suppose this question is appearing in your interviews. Both of the questions, both of the answers would be appropriate. The selection should be made on the basis of how your interview is progressing. Sometimes, for example, to make it clear, sometimes when you feel in your interview that the board members largely want more diplomatic answers, you will realize it once the interview starts progressing, and any of these questions appear then you can take one of the diplomatic stand which I mentioned here. Or if you really feel that the examiner wants a different opinion, examiner wants to know your thought, examiner wants to know your clarity of mind, then you can take another answer which I would be giving here. My preference to both the answers would be undefined, because it all depends upon your interview situations, which answer would be more appropriate. These answers are my personal opinion. This session is only to make you understand there is a way to largely, chart those difficult waters which often, sometimes takes place in your interviews. At least there would be a minute or two when such circumstances would be there where you would have to take a necessary decisive stand. So the first question which I have prepared is, what could be the possible challenges in gender pay parity? What could be the possible challenges in gender pay parity? What the meaning of this here is, okay, when you're trying to see, the world has become more egalitarian. Everybody preaches equality, but most often, almost all of us practice inequality. Then how do we ensure at least that gender equality in the context of wage payment, or in the context of monetary payments, or in the context of salary payment? What is the way out? Suppose if this is the question which appears in your interview, what should be your process ahead? What should be your way to answer this? What should be the words? Make sure the answers which I'm giving, if any person who is actually appearing for this civil services interview this year 2023 ke andar, then please ensure this, okay, you just take a white paper, that is a blank paper, and a pen. Do write it exactly how I have answered this. This would help you to fulfill this appropriate words and a suitable representation of the answer. If I look into this, to just give you the background, there are different reports which have often appeared in the newspapers, in the magazines. One such report is, as a simple truth, there is a full report published. You can just read it for your general knowledge if required. That according to this, in United States, the men gets $1, and for the same work, the women roughly receive 83 cents there. So why I've specifically used United States here is to give you a fact that even in developed country, there is a presence of gender pay parity. In the context of India, when you see World Economic Forum's 2019 Global Gender Gap Report have largely put India at 108 rank out of 149. That means India is way behind as far as the concept of gender pay parity is concerned. Despite it being a constitutional obligation that there should not be any discriminations in the wages, we do have, Minimum Wages Act, Equal Wages Act, but despite this, we are way behind as far as the gender pay parity is concerned. Not only the India, but also in the developed countries like United States, there is a gender pay parity which is present. On the other hand, if you look into National Sample Survey Organization survey, it clearly shows that on an average 100 to 123 rupees, woman is paid less when comparison to men for the same category of work or for the same type or nature of work. These facts make us clear that yes, the gender pay parity is not just an ideological debate which is present in the Indian society, rather than it is also an empirical reality. Why exactly this gender pay or gender, gap is present as far as the pay is concerned? There are multiple factors which are involved. This is merely written in order to give you a background of the topic which we are discussing, so that tomorrow there is a question that what are the factors which are leading to gender pay parity. There should be some factors available to you in a very precisely worded format. One of the most important factor is the patriarchy, which is actually maintaining the gender pay gap. This, I believe, is known to almost everybody. So this is not going to be a very impressive statement. But this manifestation of this patriarchy is often seen in various other matrices. For example, there is another reason why gender pay parity is that is biological. Biological, when I say, it means here that many times when the women are employed for a job, women largely are not the permanent employees because of their reproductive capabilities. The women often leave their jobs at a certain particular age. So when the companies are not getting those, permanent employees, they often try to hire women at a wages or a salary or a payment less than when compared to a man who is going to be a more permanent resident of that particular company. In a simple word, superficial word, if I have to use, they would remain more loyal to the company. Loyalty here is nowhere connected to gender. It is just a parlance which is being used here. On the other hand, if you look, Gender pay gap is also many times purposefully made in order to ensure that the women do not enter into the workforce itself. Because when you largely pay women less for the same work which is even done by the men, it largely creates a demotivation among the women that no, that there is no point of working at this particular pay because I'm not getting the same payment as far as my counter gender is receiving. So many times this is largely a purposefully created instrument in order to ensure that the women do not enter into the job markets and creating a competition for the men and reduces their power. And this directly relation is the power matrix, that we often see that the dominants are the people who actually control the society. And in this context of gender, the gender of men have always dominated the society irrespective of their developed stature or irrespective of the nature of society which have existed since time immemorial. Gender has always remained a dominant and men have always dominated in this gender debate. Because of the domination of men at the powerful positions or at the decision making positions, they often discriminate or often they practice or implement their patriarchal mindsets here, resulting into that gender pay or wage gap which is present throughout the world. Beside all these, there is also a debate which is rising that because of the patriarchy, many of the women largely do not participate in the STEM disciplines, that is scientific disciplines. European Union in 2012 started a project called as Women as Science Thing in order to increase the representations of women in the scientific field or scientific realms. Most of the times the women dominate in humanities. They face different forms of discriminations because of patriarchy in relation to their identity, in relation to their health, in relations to their respective educations and job as well. And as a result, they largely have less skills when compared to men. Mind you, skills here is not naturally which is built. We are talking about the skills which the women's largely is not able to develop because of the patriarchal mindsets and its practices. And because of less skills, most of the time we do see that the women's largely are paid less when compared to men, even for the same nature of work. These are some of the causes which are widely prevalent throughout the societies. But however, these are not just the only causes which is leading to gender pay parity. Now coming to the question, what are the challenges which anybody would face if they largely try to implement the reduce the gender pay parities in the societies? In that context, there would be two ways in which you can frame your answers. One answer would be a very simplistic one, answer one or method one, that the biggest challenge which anybody, sir, to the respective interview, you will address this. Sir, I personally feel that the biggest challenge would be, as far as the gender pay parity is concerned, is the patriarchal mindsets, because the patriarchy would not allow to pay equal wages or remuneration to the respective women. But I personally feel this is not going to be an impressive answer because this is very simplified answer. On the other hand, this answer could be well represented. I mean, it could be backed by more facts, it could be backed by better opinions, where you also create a possibility by mentioning certain aspect in your answers. There is a possibility that the interview may ask you a question out of your answer as well. I've just written it here, that we see that one of the biggest challenge in the gender pay parity is the ideological mindsets which are present among both men and women. Women underestimate themselves and men overestimate themselves, and as a result of which, because of low confidence present among the women and because of the domination of men, this would largely create the biggest challenge for gender pay parity. Even if we largely implement various laws, because of the mindsets which are present of both men and women, there would still remain a disparity until and unless their mindsets are actually changed. So, what I'm trying to say is that, sir, the gender pay parity which is present in the societies, starting from United States to India, the pay is only an outcome. So directly changing the pay parities would largely not make much sense, as the factors to those pay parities first needs to be tackled in order to ensure that there is a parity present between wage payments to both men and women. And those factors which I mentioned here, those needs to be first tackled in order to ensure this gender pay parity. So the causes of those gender pay parities would remain the biggest challenge. So your answer should be just worded like this, that the biggest challenge to the gender pay parity is the ideology or the mindsets of both men and women. And until this mindset is tackled, the gender pay parity would always remain a challenging practice despite the framing of multiple women-centric laws. And in order to change this mindset, you also have to give a solution here, a way forward. That in order to change the mindset, sir, I personally believe that we not only have to focus on empowering the women, we also need to ensure empowering the perspectives of women. That empowering the viewpoints of women is more important, because when the women-centric viewpoints, ideologies or thought process or belief system is empowered, there is a possibility that will lead to an empirical substantial improvement among the women's positions. Out of that, one would be gender pay parity. So I think the answer should be worded like this. So this creates a better possibility. At the same time, it makes to the interviewer clear that your thought process is so crystal clear that you know that gender pay parity is just an outcome. The challenge is largely in changing the mindset. The success of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan could be quoted, that how Swachh Bharat Abhiyan actually became a successful campaign because 36% of the funding of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan goes to awareness development, and only then the toilet developments would largely become successful. Toilets would only be successful when the mindset to use the toilet is developed. Similarly, gender pay parity would only be resulting when the mindsets of equalities are first imbibed, not only among women but also among the men, because these are the people who are largely dominating at the highest level of the powerful positions in any society. So I hope that this particular way of how to answer in your examination, especially the UPSC interview, would you're getting clarity on how to approach a particular answer. Let's go to the second question which I framed on the basis of the current affairs or the current news which have taken place. The question is, do you agree with the perception that the media has become a medium of hate speech? Now when you look into this question, this is a difficult water to chart, because the difficulty which here is you cannot directly say yes or no. Although you know that yes, media is often used for hate speech, but how do you justify if you take that stand? How do you actually take this stand without, antagonizing your interest of getting into the civil services? How do you take a stand without largely hurting or generalizing the entire media as such? The approach to this answer would make you understand whatever may be the controversies attached with the questions, whatever or however, to what extent these questions could be conflicting or dialectical in stance, there is a way out to give a clear answer with the substance and to create a genuine impression on the interviewers. I've just framed the background of this topic first. Media and the hate speech. If you look into the first aspect, there are certain conditions which are present in the society. What are those conditions? The society has become more materialistic in nature. The materialism is more valued, the substance is more valued over the character. Throughout the society, this phenomena is universally taking place. Second, easy consumption of news or of the facts, figures have become a day-to-day reality because of the rise of social media. Because of the rise of social media, there has been a very easy consumption of the news which is present. If you look into the earlier side of this debate, earlier it was believed that media represents what the reality is. Media often tries to represent the reality itself. Whatever is the reality, that is something which is represented by media. But in contemporary time, the reverse stands more true. What is that? That media, rather than representing the reality, media is actually trying to create a counter or a parallel reality, where we often say that real has become more real than the real itself. That Today, media is actually creating a parallel world where they are trying to represent certain things which may not be real, but which looks real to the people because of easy consumption which is present in the hands, which we often say in the context of communal riots, in the context of communal conflicts. Frequent abuse of media therefore is present because of the circumstances which is taking place in the world today. So we have actually reached to a point that we have a consensus that yes, media is actually promoting a hate speech. But again, now the problem is, okay, by looking into this background, it looks justified that media is actually promoting a hate speech. But sir, how do I represent it in an interview? Because it's not possible to give a background just like I used to do it in my mains paper. Then how do I represent the answer in the shortest possible manner, which presents my clarity, at the same time does not largely create a negative impression about my answers that I am being a pessimistic fellow or aspirant there? There are two ways to answer this. One simplistic way is, sir, I personally believe that yes, in contemporary time, because of the rise or easy consumption of media and the change in the values of society, media often is being misused in and promotes the practices such as hate speech. If you answer this in this manner, maybe there was a possibility you could have created an opinion out of it. Maybe there was a possibility you could have impressed the examiner or interviews out of it. But no, you provided a simple answer. You took a stand by largely playing a diplomat, taking a diplomatic outlook there. And you may actually risk your selection in such questions. Such questions creates the best impressions. Such question really represents your character, really represents your style of representations. So I would prefer the second answer to this question. This is the way you should give your answers. What? Sir, yes, media is spreading fake news, and on the basis of which many times the hate speeches are often being the outcome of such representations. But at the same time, sir, it's difficult to generalize that media is spreading a hate speech. This at the best stands true to social media, that yes, social media, if it is said that social media is promoting a hate speech, then I personally agree, sir, that yes, media has become a tool or an instrument to spread hate speech. But if I have to generalize for the entire media, which also includes the print media, which also includes the television media, radio channels, then in such context, sir, I do not personally believe that the entire media community can be branded to spread or promote hate speech, because the social media is not regulated. So there is a high possibility of having a direct relationship with the hate speech, which we are often seeing in the society. But as far as the newspaper, that is the print and television media is concerned, there are certain mechanisms, statutory or executive, imposed in order to restrain, in order to ensure that the media does not promote or even justify a hate speech. So my answer would be that yes, media is having, we are seeing that there has been a very strong role of media in the context of promotion of hate speech is concerned. But however, sir, I personally believe this is restricted only to social media at the best, as the print and the broadcasting media somehow is regulated either by a executive, or statutory or a non-statutory backing. So you have taken a stand that yes, media is promoting hate speech, but however, this cannot be generalized. At the same time, you can also add a way forward that I believe, sir, that yes, media may promote hate speech, but at the end, it is the people. It is the people who largely determines the outcome of hate speech. Hate speech in itself may not have any impact. Only when the people starts reacting on the hate speech, it would have certain substantial impact on the various ethos and structures of society. If the people are conscious enough, then there is a possibility that the hate speech may not have any impact on the society. When I'm not ready to accept any fake news on the WhatsApp university, there is a possibility that over a period of time, these news would stop from spreading. So do take that stand, but this has to be added only when the examiner asks you that what do you think, Mr. Divakar, would be a way forward to tackle the hate speech. Then in that context, it is the awareness of the citizens, if increased, only then the hate speech can be regulated, because or else the hate speech is going to remain a social fact of the society, reality of society, because of fast spread of modern media and of handheld device where the citizen journalists have become very prominent. I hope you understand from the second question how brilliantly we have charted this difficult waters, and we have presented our clarity. We have taken a decisive stand. At the same time, we have not generalized the entire media. So please learn from this session that there has to be a very genuine representation of your opinions to the interviewer if you really want to get that flamboyant marks in order to get into an All India service rank. The third question is, should the same-sex marriages be legalized? The marriage, the abortions, and these aspects have been very much in the news in the recent times. There could be generally a question asked, do you think that same-sex marriages should be legalized? Obviously, in India we are talking about, there are other countries, in some countries already the legalization process have not only started, but it has also culminated. What do you think, should it be realized? Should it be legalized? I've created a background first. See, before providing an opinion, you should just develop an understanding. Only then the clarity comes, as you know it well, as you have gone through those mains examinations. See, if you look into the goal of marriage in the prior societies or in the previous times, the marriage in India were considered as sacred. The goal of the marriage majorly was reproduction. But today, if you look into the goal of marriage, there are alternative mechanisms available to reproductions, just like adoptions, and etc. IVF and other technologies are available. Therefore, the goal of marriage, the marriage have completely come out of reproduction today. And majorly the goal of marriage today in this stressful society is to develop emotions, to develop bonding, to develop an emotional connect with the people. The person, your spouse, could be men or could be women. Agar if the marriage goal is not reproduction today, and if the goal of the marriage is more emotional connectivity, then I personally feel there is no reason that the same-sex marriages should largely not be legalized. But at the same time, since it's in India, there is a background to this as well. That we see in Indian society, the emotion still plays a very important and prominent role. The marriage still remains sacred phenomena to a very large extent, and it is still deeply connected with the rituals and the cultural aspects of the respective society. In this context, taking the background of Indian society, taking the changes in marriage, there are certain oppositions present to same-sex marriages, as they say this, that the same-sex marriages is unnatural. It's against the nature. It's against the creation, which the creator actually made marriages for. But again, now the point comes is, if this is unnatural, then why this particular sex toys are actually becoming famous throughout the world? Why there are other categories of unnatural sexual intercourses mechanisms present in society? If this is unnatural, then even this is something which is definitely should be considered as unnatural, that having a sex or an intercourse with a toy would definitely not fit into the definition of natural intercourse. Why I have specifically written this? Because in an interview, there could be a circumstances that when you take a stand on same-sex marriages, there could be a cross question to you that don't you think this is an unnatural practice? Then in such circumstances, you can just kindly, with a gratitude, quote this. Sir, it may be a natural practice, respected sir, but at the same time, if we largely are equating the same-sex marriages with the intercourse, then in such circumstances, having a sex or an intercourse with the toys is equally unnatural, but there is hardly any debate on this. So you would have justified your opinion to the interviewer, and he would have definitely been impressed by you. Because, sir, if you're talking about same-sex marriages as only with reproduction, only with the intercourse, then even this is unnatural. So examiner will now not have a counter view to counter your answer there. But now what stand should one take? Should it be legalized or not? The first answer to this question could be like this, that yes sir, the same-sex marriages should be legalized because there has been a drastic change in the understanding of marriages. And just like many other countries have also legalized it, in India that process should start in order to largely understand that marriage today has become more an economical aspect, it has become more an emotional bonding rather than being a reproductive mechanisms. I think very good representation of an answer, kindly worded as well. But better answer than this could be the other one as well. You can take this stand as well, but at the same time, you can even take this stand with is included with the justification as well. What we are saying is that, sir, by keeping into account the Indian value systems and by keeping into account that this legalization of same-sex marriages could bring havoc in short period of time, if a proper awareness is not built against these mechanisms, it also creates a possibility that the marriage systems or mechanisms in India may be threatened. So I personally believe, sir, rather than focusing on legalizing the same-sex marriages in immediate scenario, one should largely try to, neutralize the opposition against the same-sex marriages. What we are trying to say here is, sir, I personally believe that in present circumstances, legalization may not be a solution because laws at the brink can bring change. It cannot bring change in ideologies or mindsets. As untouchability, bonded labor, child labor, all these practices are still present despite having the law or stringent laws, non-bailable offences being made. In such circumstances, it will not yield any result, even if it is legalized. What we need to do is, at the best, what has already been done, is decriminalizing the same-sex marriages. So, okay, what we are saying is, okay, we may go for legalizations, but that should be taken only when an awareness is built against this. As of now, what India should focus is not on the legalization of same-sex marriages. India should more focus on developing an awareness about the same-sex relationships and neutralize the opinions against it first. And over a period of time, when this is done over a period of time, there is a possibility we can take a stand on legalization of marriage. What exactly you have done in this answer? You have given a highly pragmatic answer that yes sir, I personally have a full support to legalization of same-sex marriages, but the situations are not ripe. Even in the West, it took more than 50 years. Today, the same situation is there where we stand today. Immediate legalizations may create more havoc and conflict only over a period of time when the awareness is built. Right now, the focus should be on decriminalizing the same-sex relationships, not on legalizing the same-sex marriages. One line, this should be your stand taken as far as the same-sex marriages are concerned. I hope this further has given you an opinion that how wisely we have charted to the very aspect of those difficult waters, giving a concrete opinion, taking a decisive stand at the same time without annoying any of the interviewers or interview members or panel members. Coming to the next question. What are the new forms of communalism which we see in Indian society today? Okay, what are those new forms of communalism which we are actually often witnessing? Now what, again, this is a controversial question. Why? Because somehow some sort of politics is getting attached with communalism. And mind you, you would not be taking any political party's name. You would not be using the words like BJP's, INC's or AAP or any other organizations for that matter or concern. How do you then say what are the new forms? This is one question where I often see that students often make certain degree of mistakes. Let's first get a background of the topic clear. What exactly is the meaning or the essence of communalism? See, in South Asia, the word communalism is directly connected or is an ideology which is directly connected with the religious mindsets. But outside South Asia, when we take rest of the world, communalism is equated with communism. It is absolutely equated with communal living, where the people's ownership of resources exists but not private wealth. In India, this is the meaning. Now, the question is asking what has been the change in the nature of communalism? Earlier, it was religious purely. Today we often read in newspaper, there are new forms or manifestations in which communalism is present. For example, there is now ethnic communalism. Communalism refers to what? Where the people, the followers of two different religions considers that the interests of their followers are different from each other, or sometimes antagonistic to each other, dialectical to each other. Ethnic communalism, where two ethnic communities are actually considering their interests are different and they often clash with each other. Similarly, language communalism. Similarly, religious communalism. So one simplistic understanding of communalism in its new form is, the new forms of communalism which are present today are that communalism today is not merely a religious ideology. There are other forms of communalism present in the forms of ethnic communalism or linguistic communalism in Indian society. So this is one answer which often the student gives to the interviewer if such question is appearing. But this is not properly theoretically correct, because communalism is always identified with religious mindsets and religious ideology. There are no ifs, there are no buts as far as this is concerned. Yes, as far as fundamentalism is concerned, there could be linguistic fundamentalism, because fundamentalism talks about infallibility. Then what could be the new forms? There is one article written by Zoya Hassan where she advocates that the nature of communalism in Indian society have changed. That would be my answer too. What she says in the article is that earlier the communalism was largely a mass phenomena where group violence or violence at a large scale used to take place, taking the forms of communal riots. But in contemporary time, the violent communalism has become silent communalism, where she equates that in modern times the communalism is practiced not through communal riots. Rather than, communalism is largely seen where the state has become as silent spectators, tolerating the communal feelings without taking any action. So in a simple term, what I want to say is your answer should be, so the communalism has remained a religious ideology, and even in contemporary time, despite the variation in its form, the communalism remains strongly connected to one's religion. But the very nature of communalism has changed. As earlier the communalism used to be a mass phenomena, visible in the forms of communal riots. But today, communalism is more visible at institutional level, such as institutional communalism. And communalism today is more reflected where the state has become the silent spectators of the various communal or hate speeches taking place in the society. This would actually now do one thing, that the interviewer would be clear. You are dead clear with the concept of communalism. You are not using those factually incorrect forms of communalism like language communism, ethnic communalism, and other forms of communalism. So make sure this question would test your conceptual understanding if it appears. So new form kya hai? The state has become largely silent as far as the communal incidents are concerned. State is not taking any actions. We often see that mob lynching, hate speeches are there when state is just tolerating it without taking any stand on it, and largely not supporting any communal activities, but rather than not even rejecting those communal activities. I'm not saying this. It's Zoya Hassan who has created this opinion, and she can largely act as a smoothie when your answer to communalism and its changing form is concerned. Let's look into the next question which we have here. Recently, the Union Government of India has proposed to make Hindi a compulsory subject up to class 10 in the northeastern states. Do you agree with this move? Do you accept that this should be made? Again, this is definitely a difficult stand to take. Now the point is this. Let's again get back to the background before getting to the answer. If you look into, should Hindi be made compulsory as far as the northeastern states are concerned, at least up to 10th standard? The background of this language is that in 1947, the linguistic movement started where the people wanted to get divided on the basis of their respective languages. The language even today has remained a highly emotional aspect as far as Indian society is concerned. There has been one of the least change as far as that emotional affiliation connection with the language is concerned. In such circumstances, if you look into this, it becomes very difficult to largely kill that diversity which is present. On one hand, we often say that India is a highly diversified country. But on the other hand, we are trying to bring a uniformity by imposing a particular language on a particular aspect. So two things which needs to be taken care is diversity is very strong in India, the background and the emotional attachment to the language. If these 2 points are kept in your mind when you enter into an interview, and if such question is falling in front of you, then you would be very clear that okay, I have to first respect this, I have to follow this with the spirit is. Next, Northeast conditions you need to take into account. In Northeast, we often see that are multiple tribal groups which are often present, and within the same states, there are multiple forms of tribe and ethnic identities which are not only present, but also have different forms of contradictions or conflicting interest with each other. And in such circumstances, if you take these backgrounds into account, and if certain Hindi or any language is imposed on these people, there would be an outburst. So this, rather than bringing that benefits of imposition of Hindi, would rather be more disadvantageous to these sections, and they would largely create more fertile ground for the conflicts where certain people would largely politicize this imposition for their political benefit and hamper that solidarity, integration, fraternity, brotherhood and integrity of the nation as well. And remember, Northeast also is a part where there is an external security threats present from across the borders. In all these background circumstances, now it becomes very justified that imposition of Hindi is going to yield more negative results. But then the question comes, how do we represent it in appropriate word? What should be the mechanisms in which one should represent this particular answer? Then I have two answers for you. The answer one, yes, the Hindi language should be imposed because the language of Hindi would largely develop a better understanding of the larger Indian society and its culture in Northeast, and therefore bringing integration. But this again, as I said, is a highly diplomatic answer where you're just trying, where the interviewer realizes that you are not trying to take any stand on the basis of those practical evidences which you have seen here. You have negated all the practical evidences present in the society of Northeast as such, and you have taken a stand pro-government in order to impress the interviewer that yes, we should impose Hindi because this will bring a better integrations. Friends, this integration is only going to exist on theories, on books or on papers. This is the answer, or this would have been the answer I would have given if I would have appeared for the interview and this question would have appeared in front of me. That first thing is this, that in North, respected sir, the language has been an emotional aspect as far as the Indian society is concerned. Further, by looking into the Northeastern circumstances in present times, there is a weak psychological integration where there exists fear in the minds of certain tribes and ethnic communities as far as the larger Indian society is concerned. Coupled with this, in a democracy, anything which is imposed would always be rebelled against. By keeping all these circumstances in mind, imposition of Hindi largely would hamper the unity. Rather than imposing Hindi, we should first try to tackle the immediate concern of these populations. Only then that better integration would take place. Then sir, why have we written A intelligence? This is nothing but artificial intelligence. Now you would use this only if you are prepared the topic of artificial intelligence, because what happens is, please listen to it very carefully. If you put this artificial intelligence, I'm pretty much sure the next question would be from artificial intelligence. And if you are belonging to any technological subjects and this artificial intelligence is prepared by you, do put this up, because the examiner would be mesmerized that how you are using the future technologies in order to largely take a call on the contemporary stance or issues. What is that? That is, for example, sir, by looking into the psychological aspects and also the India being a democratic country, the democracy, anything which is imposed would largely be rebelled. And coupled with this, we are largely a society, we are trying to largely become Vishwa Guru by using the artificial intelligent technologies in the forthcoming centuries or futures or decades. If the artificial intelligence has to be developed, then the language would become redundant. The language which one should develop is of coding rather than the language one should develop is of Hindi. Because in future what would happen is through coding you will able to interact with each other if this becomes a reality someday. So if this becomes a reality, then what we need to develop is the language of coding, not the language of Hindi, in irrespective of the states which is largely present. So please ensure this. If you use this, the interviewer would see that you have a vision for the future as well. That if this becomes a reality, what we today require is to teach our students or fellow childrens the language of coding rather than the language of communication present in the contemporary times, because imposition of Hindi may largely bring certain degree of integration or uniformity. But would that uniformity hamper your diversity, or would that uniformity become a hurdle, or would it contribute to anything to the future visions of the country? No, as of now, this doesn't look appropriate. So I hope the way we have answered certain practical, controversial questions would help you to at least create that vision in your next span of certain 20, 25 or 30 or 1 month when your interview is going to be there. Start thinking and dwelling on any topic, any question. Start framing the questions from editorials. Learn their background. By keeping their background, try to present a more pragmatic answer. 3 things should be there in your answers. A clear expression of an opinion, taking a stand which is not only taking the contemporary circumstances but also the future circumstances. And third one, presenting it with a real good energy, with a real good confidence, because if you present it with confidence, it does certainly make an extreme impact on the people who are listening to this. Thank you so much for giving me your ears, and I hope you liked this session. And if anybody wants me to answer further there is a part 2 of this series which would be coming, where again I'll discuss 4 to 5 more controversial questions, especially with respect to inequality, women, and other aspects of caste. Do watch that session as well. And suppose before that, if any of you want me to answer any of the controversial questions, do leave the comment in the comment section so that I'll help you to even make you understand how those controversial questions or the questions which you're facing difficulties could be answered. Thank you so much. And yes, guys, wish you all the best. Remember in your interviews that the level of your energy would be the most important asset which you will be having when you will be appearing for your interviews. Thank you so much. Take care. Happy studying.
StudyIQ IAS अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।